Don't we all like bass? And don't we all like to have it sound a little bit better? Because when talking about bass guitars, there's a lot of stuff that I see during mixing that could have been done better during the recording. And when it comes to stringed instruments, but also to almost every instrument, it's the way you play it that defines the biggest part of the sound. And that is exactly what Lewin from GarageBand and Beyond is going to talk about in this week's guest video while I'm still off doing something. Lewin is going to give us all a bass guitar lesson in such a way that we as audio engineers can learn something about it. I've just watched it and I've learned a few things. So yeah, I highly recommend what is coming after the break. And now I pass the mic to Lewin. Lewin, let's get started.
Thank you very much, Vitse, for that lovely introduction. Hey, everybody. My name is Lewin. I run a YouTube channel called GarageBand and Beyond, where for the last 11 and a half years, I have been making basic tutorials or beginner tutorials, how to record on GarageBand. I do equipment reviews. I do piano lessons for guitarists. I do guitar reviews, microphone reviews, plugin reviews, all sorts of different reviews, plus a ton of tutorials which are really aimed at beginners out there and all revolving around GarageBand. But for the very most part, the lessons that I teach can be applied to any DAW that you are recording on. So if any of that sounds mildly interesting to you, come check out my channel, GarageBand and Beyond. I'm sure he has put a link down below. So big thanks to Vitse for asking me to come and, substitute while he is on his top secret mission. I know what's going on. I'm not allowed to tell you guys, but for you regular White Sea Studio fans out there, you guys are going to be very happy. I'm also going to be very happy when I get to see what happened down there. I'm not allowed to tell you, so we should stop talking about that. Why I am here today is to teach you guys how to get good tone out of your hands when you're playing the bass, okay? So this is my 1980 G&L L1000, little 4-string bass that I truly do love. And right out of the gate, I want to talk to guitar players out there who have bought a bass and want to start putting down their own bass tracks. Obviously, this is a very natural and normal thing to do. One of the most common mistakes I see, let's just do it, it's when I see people playing, like slapping down on the downbeat, right? So if I'm just going, that sound, don't do that, right? Unless for some reason the song really calls for it, right? But in general, this is one of the sounds that I know when I'm mixing a song that a bass player has done a lot of that downbeat slapping. If it's not perfectly in time, it ends up like flamming against like a snare drum or a hi-hat or a fill. It's a sound you don't want to be, giving to your engineer or producer to deal with later in the mixing stage. So, just remember, you can do it in your head. Sometimes I know people who like click with their teeth instead of doing that. You might tap your foot, whatever you want, but don't do that. Right? That's pretty simple. Find some other place on your body, some other way to get that rhythm out. If you must do it, just find another place to play it, not on the bass. Okay? Number 2, I want to talk about how many different things your right hand can do when you're playing the bass, right? So obviously, like most people, you play with your fingers like that. You can play with your thumb and middle finger. So you're doing like where you're palm muting with the back of your hand here. That's like a very Paul McCartney. Very Paul McCartney style, right? And the pick, the pick. People go nuts. I don't know what it is about bass players, or like, let's say some bass players. They're like, I will never use a pick on the bass. That is not a cool thing to do. I completely disagree with you. I think that why wouldn't you use every tool at your disposal when you're playing live or recording? If the song calls for a picky bass sound, then you're never going to do that with your fingers. You're not going to do it with your thumb. The only thing that can make that sound is a pick. So I just wanted to bring that up. Don't be afraid of the pick, okay? So one of the things that I do every time I'm playing with the pick is I am almost always muting with the back fleshy side of my hand here, right? I try to keep it, somewhere in front of the bridge here, right? And the nice thing about a bass is there's so much energy going into the strings. You don't have to be right on the bridge like a guitar because the strings are so thick. They transfer and still make sound even if you're not exactly on the bridge. So you don't have to be right against it, but you can be around here. Right? It's just a nice way to get like a more muted tone out of it, right? Obviously. Right? Playing with a pick is really, really fun. I personally like these red Dunlops or the yellow ones occasionally. I like to have a very light pick for playing bass. I don't like thick picks. They pull too much. There's too much work that goes into a heavy pick. So that's just one of those sounds. But my advice for getting good tone out of that is mute it. And like everything, any style, fingers, thumb, or pick, make sure that your notes are even across the board as much as you can volume wise, right? So, I'm not like, if you're going like, right, if you're doing something like that, you don't want that upstroke, that extra note to be louder or quieter. You want it to be even, right? So if it was quieter, right, you want it to be, remember, bass players, we are members of the rhythm section of a basic 4-piece band, right? If there are drums and bass, the bass player is part of the rhythm section. If you start dropping notes in volume, you're going to start dropping the beat and the overall feel. So just make sure that your notes are nice and even, okay? So now we've done pick and we've done some, Paul McCartney, thumb and finger. Most popular way to go here is just the regular old finger style here, right? So my advice to you when you're doing this is to really find the sweet spot that is pretty much, for me, it's a couple inches, maybe off the bridge. We'll call that 4 inches off the bridge. I like there to be some tension, right? As you come up here, it's really much more loose. Plus you get a different tone. Come down here, it's, right? Could you hear the definition of those sounds, of those notes? Versus, right? These are sort of like mushy. And these are, they have a nice, like, sort of pronounced, there's a lot more treble in there, For any of you who just recently watched the Paul McCartney and Rick Rubin special that just came out a couple days ago, watch it. Number one, it's awesome. But Paul talks about like really loving like a super bright bass tone, which I thought was really interesting. So one of the ways he does that is by using a pick. Or if he's doing this thumb thing, they actually played some recordings where he had a second bass track that was played with a pick that was doing more or less what the original bass track was, where he was, playing a thumb style, but he would overdub a picky style to get that treble sound. He personally really likes a lot of treble in his bass sounds when the song calls for it, okay? So anyway, back to what I'm talking about here, getting good tone out of your right hand, right? So when you're doing this with your hand over here, I did my thing. Right? When you're doing those kinds of things, again, you want them to be very even in volume, especially if you're recording. This will be a very easy thing for you to watch and make sure that you're keeping them even. But what that is going to require is that you become very, very familiar with the difference in the way the strings feel under your fingers, right? So the more thick the string, the less energy you're going to have to put into it to get proper volume out. When you get up to these higher strings, like the G string here, which is a much thinner piece of metal, simply because it's thinner, it is not able to produce as much volume as the lower string, right? This is just physics. A smaller piece of metal isn't going to hit that electromagnetic field that the pickup is creating, and it's just simply not going to translate an equal amount of volume. And that is because it is less metal, right? Pretty easy explanation. So you just want to make sure that when you're up on these higher strings that you're putting a little bit more energy into those strings, right? 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 The other thing is if you hit the low strings too hard, they flop and make sort of an awful sound. So we don't like that. So what I'm saying is when you're doing these things, right? Those high notes I'm putting a lot more snap and a lot more energy into that string, like these two, than I am on the A string, right? That string's pretty thick. It's moving a lot, so I don't have to put so much energy into it, okay? So this spot down here, personally for me, and if you watch a lot of like the greats out there, this is the area where they're playing. It's, somewhere a couple inches off their bridge. Again, this is going to be dependent on the instrument that you're playing, the song style, and your hand strength and everything. It's going to be a little bit personalized, but, subject to subject, person to person, bass to bass. It's all going to be a little bit different. However, it is pretty safe to say that this general area, 4 to 5 inches off the bridge is pretty much the sweet spot on most basses for most applications. If you're playing rock, if you're playing pop, if you're playing R&B, if you're playing hip hop, this is the area where you get enough treble out of the sound, and still plenty of low end. Again, if you're up here, you don't get as much treble, right? It's like soft and mushy, which I totally do sometimes, if it's like a quiet part of a song or where I just simply need to play whole notes, right? Doing it here, like if I play down here and I'll just do this, it's a nice tone. That's where I'm telling you to play. But if I do it up here, it's got that little swell. It's a little bit sweeter. It's very subtle, but it's just a bigger, warmer, rounder sound. So if you're holding whole notes, check it out. It might be cool to play it more up on the neck. Right? Versus, hear the tonal difference there? Versus, right? Very, very, very simple thing to do. But what I want you to take away from this lesson is that you should be really trying to find that sweet spot down here, especially if you're doing it with your fingers here. That is this point for me on my bass. This is the sweet spot, and every bass has one. And so you should definitely take the time to find that sweet spot on your bass, because it's a delicious place to be. Now, I'm not going to be talking about like thumb slapping, popping, because pretty not beginnery, right? That's not a beginner lesson. So I do want to go back a little bit to this thumb and finger thing, right? Short notes work really well. So if you're right? Short notes are a great excuse to start playing with your thumb, and I like to use my index finger to grab, some of the upper notes. Right? That's a great time to start, if the song is sort of like, let's say, Beatlesque, and you need really short notes, that's going to be a thumb thing, right? Thumb and forefinger and palm muting, right? If you want to go back a little bit to the pick again here, I did say like most of the time I'm muting, and I just want to say there are times occasionally I don't, and it's usually if I'm like playing on a rock gig. I do a lot of session work, and by the way, I can be hired for session work. Check out my website, garagebandandbeyond.com. There are times where that's totally fine. but it is sort of like a full throttle. It's definitely like a full throttle sound, right? And only use it when you really need to be going all hard balls to the walls kind of a thing, right? So I want to talk about the right hand, and that's why I have only been talking about the right hand, because I think predominantly most bass players, like, really, you're concentrating on your left hand technique. I'm sure you guys all pretty much know the basic left hand technique of, more or less trying to keep your fingers parallel to the frets themselves. That is not written in stone, just something to keep in your mind as you're playing for efficiency. You want to be as close to the back of the fret, here, like say we're on the 5th fret, you want to be here and not here for that buzzy reason, right? That stuff is super basic. I think the right hand, if you're a right-handed player, the right hand is where all the tone is really coming out of your hands on a bass, and guitar too. I think the right hand is, if you're a right-handed player, is widely overlooked by most guitar players. Everybody's concentrating on their left hand, left hand, left hand. Don't only concentrate on your left hand. Make sure that you take the time to concentrate on what your right hand is doing. Now, very last thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to use very simple terms here. I'm not going to use like quarter notes, whole notes, 8th notes, 16th notes. I'm going to say long notes and short notes, okay? This is a really, really easy way to think about it. Long notes, short notes, right? So again, if I'm just going, right? All long notes, right? But if I want to throw in a couple of short notes in there, like, short notes, long notes, play with those things. Experiment with mixing them up, and just play with the rhythms a little bit, It's a really, really easy, simple thing. Just make sure you're paying attention to some of those short notes and the long notes. It's one of those things that can make a bass part extra funky, is throwing in some of those really fun short notes, Right? You understand what I'm saying? Some of those were long, some of those were short. Makes it a little more fun to play, a little more funky. Now I want to say one more thing. If you are playing with a drummer, and like I stated before, bass players, we are part of the rhythm section. You should most definitely be listening to what the kick drum is doing and playing along with that kick drum as often as is appropriate for the song or the performance that you're in the middle of, right? But one of the things that sticking to the kick drum will do, it will absolutely positively make your tone better, and it will make the kick drum even boomier. If you start locking those two tones in together, all that will result is better tone at, like, from the stage, like people watching, they're gonna be like, man, that kick drum sounds great. Most likely the reason, maybe he has an awesome kick drum with a good microphone, all that stuff. But one of the things you can do to really help a drummer get extra good bass drum sound is by playing along with that kick drum. Like I said before, when it's appropriate and in the context of whatever song you're doing, if it's appropriate, that's one of the great things you can do to help the bass drum sound better. Plus, locking in your section of the rhythm section, right? You're locking your parts together. And then obviously, it's going to make the kick drum sound better. It's also going to make your bass part sound better. It's going to have that punch that a kick drum can deliver, and only a kick drum can deliver. If you lock your instrument up with that when it is appropriate, it's a delicious little technique. Great for R&B, great for rock and roll, great for folk music, great for, pretty much every time I play bass, I make sure that I'm listening to the kick drum and accenting moments with that kick drum as much as I think is appropriate. Sometimes I'm dead straight on that kick drum, and other times I'm a little more loose, but I am paying attention to it and I'm working with the kick drum. It's an essential component of being part of the rhythm section of a band. So I just wanted to bring that up here at the end. So I hope that you guys got something out of that. I think bass playing is super, super fun. And I know a lot of you are guitar players out there who probably have a bass. So I wanted to give you guys a couple of things to think about. Really basic lesson for beginners. Again, big thanks to Vitze from White Sea Studios for having me over here. And you guys, actually, my channel has been around for 11 years. I'm less than 3,000 people away from hitting 100,000 subscribers. So I would love it if you guys came over to my channel, checked out the material, and if you do like it, hit that subscribe button, because I am really, really, really trying to get that play button from YouTube. I mean, after 11 years, I kind of feel like I really deserve it and I really want it. So anyway, you guys, I hope you got something out of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out my channel, and of course, stay here on White Sea Studios and check out all the videos that are over here. And that's it. Okay, so I think Vitze is going to give you a little outro, so hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. Peace and love.
Alright, that's it for the video from Lewin. I really like what Lewin is doing on YouTube, and I think he really deserves to get a silver play button. So why don't we all go to his channel and subscribe? He really, really deserves it. Now, next week, there's a chance that I might be back with some very exciting news. Or there's another guest video coming, but I don't have that one confirmed yet. I'll keep you all in suspense about that. For now, I want to thank you all for watching. The ways to support White Sea Studio during this project time, because what I'm doing is costing a lot of cash, actually. You can support me with the links below. Patreon will be over here, and of course, other videos from me will be over here. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to Lewin's channel, actually. GarageBand and beyond. Keep pushing, and bye-bye.